Hey everyone, Justin here. So welcome to everybody on our Healthy Habits series, as well as our Made for Mondays podcast. We're in this series, you guys know, about innovation and creativity and kind of seeing the future before the future sees us. And so we're just blessed to just talk to some amazing leaders. And today we're privileged to have, I think, one of the most creative people that I know. And her name is Sherri Love. Sherri goes to Congdon Baptist Church in Providence, Rhode Island, and she'll tell you her story in a second. But would you guys help me welcome to the podcast, to our stream today? Would you guys help me welcome Sherri? Hey, Sherri.
Hi, Pastor Justin. Hi, everyone.
Thank you for joining us, Sherri. Sherri, as we jump into this today, can you tell us a little bit just about you, like who you are, what you do, and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Sure. My name is Sherri Love. I am a Georgia native. I grew up in Soperton, Georgia. I'm one of 4 siblings. I'm from Soperton. It's a small town in Georgia. After high school, I went to Montgomery County High School. I attended and graduated from the Atlanta College of Art. It's the oldest, or it was the oldest art school in the Southeast. I've always been a visual artist. I have always loved visual art. I won't belabor you with the story of how every white wall in my parents' house was a canvas, but it was really and truly. They had to repaint their bedroom a couple of times.
Wow.
Drawing and creative is what I have always and still loved to do. Even to this day, in high school, my home economics teacher, I remember her saying when she found out I was going to art school, she was like, "Art school, you'll never make any money in art." And her sons were doctors and dentists, so she was kind of old school. And I think the only idea of art she had was struggling artist, painter. I don't think she understood how multifaceted art and design was. And truthfully, neither did I. My high school was really, really small. And in my senior year, I think we were lucky enough to have art as an elective that was offered by one of the local colleges, Bruton Parker. So that was, I was like, this is perfect for me. So when I went to college, I thought that I wanted to major in architecture because I just didn't understand how vast design and communication art and visual art was. I changed my major a couple of times. I think I started with advertising, and then I found, like, I didn't know that illustration was a major. I knew that it was what I love to do, and it was like, this is it. I found it. I found my path. And so my major was illustration, and my minor was graphic design. After college, I worked for print companies. I worked for startups. I worked at in-house agencies and advertising agencies. Fast forward to today, I am an associate creative director for our in-house creative department at CVS Health. I've been here 13 years. I've served different roles. I started as senior print designer and then senior packaging designer, and transitioned to leadership where I am currently. That's
Awesome.
That's been my career journey.
That's awesome. No, thanks for sharing that. I guess a question I have to that, in light of what you just said, is how did you share with others, or have you seen others like yourself get past that poor artist picture in their head, right? Because I hear that a lot about that myself. Like when I was in school, and even like when I first started even personally doing graphic design work, it was like, you can do that, but that has to be a side hustle. It can't be a main thing. And how did you work through that, or the people you work with, like, get past that mindset where, like, no, this is a career. This isn't just a hobby I do in the corner after I get off work.
That's a really good question. I don't think it was ever, I never gave it that much thought. I always knew what I wanted to do and what I love to do. So call it, my being naive. I don't think it was ever, I never gave it that much consideration. Even when my home ec teacher said it to me, it was like, what does she know? I I would, and like I said, there's so many facets of creativity. I think folks just have a general idea of the struggling painter, and I went to school with some amazing painters who have made huge names for themselves.
Wow.
But I would just say, don't let that be a barrier for you. If it's what you love to do, be persistent, be diligent, whatever whatever facet of creativity you're going into, whether it's you know, painting or drawing or sculpting or printmaking or, you know, apparel design or sneaker design, whatever that facet is, do your homework, be open to inspiration everywhere, talk to people, engage with people, and yeah, you know, just don't, I know this sounds cliche, but don't consider that as a barrier. If you know what you love to do, keep your eye on that path for yourself. And I think, you know, I'm pretty confident that the doors will open. I'm a person of prayer. I prayed a lot. My parents did too. I didn't think we were going to be able to get through art school. I think I just finished off paying my student loans. Seriously. So I would say be persistent, be prayerful, seriously, and trust the talent that you have. Trust that it'll open doors for you.
No, thank you for that. That's awesome. So in your field and what you're doing, what are some things you're seeing happen in terms of like graphic and creative trends? I mean, I know it's 2020, and just from hearing what you said the past 13 years, I can only imagine what you've seen over 13 years in terms of where you started and where you are now. What are some trends and things you're starting to see pick up rapidly in your field?
Whew, that's a huge one. I don't know. Creativity is so broad, and I don't know if I'd want to necessarily box it into what I would consider trends, but I would say so much of what's happening in our society, from so much of what's going on politically, that influences what I see, and that influences what I see. That influences how I feel like people are expressing themselves visually. I definitely wouldn't categorize myself as being the expert on this, but I think we're in a time where it's hard to ignore, you know, the state of the world economically, racially, socially. So I see folks being a little bit more open to expressing themselves, whether it's I don't know, whether they're designing for a cause, or whether they just need a respite in terms of, you know, everything that's going on, and embracing color, embracing just more broad ideas, using different mediums to express themselves, a combination of mediums, paint and design and texture. I I guess that's the answer to that. I guess that's the answer to that question. Folks are just being much more open, just more receptive to allowing inspiration to come in all forms and from many different places.
No, that's awesome. I think it's interesting to hear that, and to even think about like how inspiration is broad and creativity is very broad too. That it's not a one trick pony, right? And I think that's the thing. I guess like I've seen a lot where it's like it's graphic design, it's video, it's graffiti, you know, but it's not graffiti, it's art, right? And it's just all these different things. I think it's so broad. Yeah, no, thank you. So with that too, Sherri. So I think I want to ask about you too. So the position you're in. So you're a creative, but you're a leader as well, right? And so you're leading people. How do you balance, or so not balance? How do you work the two together in the ways that you lead the people that you're leading? So we have a lot of leaders that listen to our podcast, I personally practice adaptive leadership. I just love Ronald Heifetz, but I'm curious how you mesh Sherri's creative mindset with also the ways that you lead the staff that you have to lead. How do you work all of Sherri into making sure your staff is empowered?
Sure. One thing is I don't try to stifle their creativity. We do, you know, our creative team is multi-generational. We have millennials, we have Gen Xers, we have boomers, and, you know, I think the one thing that I wouldn't want to do is stifle creativity. Because I work for an in-house creative agency, we have brand standards and guidelines that we have to adhere to.
Mhm.
So I think as much as we try to adhere to that branding, sometimes we tend to go off the rails, and it's not on its own. Ideas that we come up with may be wonderful, but I always have to look at them through the lens of, is it on brand? Is it the best expression of our brand? And one way that I try not to stifle creativity is, if someone has an idea or a concept that feels off brand or just, wildly off brand, I'll say, let's table this for, let's table this. And, it might not be right for this particular campaign, but I think there's always a way to incorporate your idea or your thinking into the work. I think it's really important to emphasize we do have brand standards that are set before. So it's a little bit different than if I were, if I were an independent
Yeah.
designer and doing work for different brands.
Yeah.
But I would say just keeping myself open to how the way others express themselves, and keeping myself open to understanding that their creative perspective is different than mine. What I want to do is foster that. I never want to stifle that.
Yeah.
I want to foster an environment of, open communication and creativity. So, I would say making sure in my role as a director,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that I, that I understand our brand and how we can flex in our brand within our brand, but also recognizing that, especially our younger designers, their perspective is different than mine, and trying to work with them to figure out ways to incorporate their perspective into the work that we do for CVS Health.
Wow. No, thank you. I think that's why I love hearing that, because what I heard in that too was even the ways that you handle conflict, right? And just like, because I'm sure it arises, and even like the differences there when it comes to just different generations, mindsets, things that we see, and so that's a beautiful way to see it. Because I think it's funny, the old practice I think was like the quote unquote open door policy, right? and I think I think that just hearing you saying it's just really an open creative policy. And tabling with a purpose, which is awesome. So what are some things too, Sherri? So in the field that you're in too, so with that, commerce and creativity. So this world is never going to be the same. And the ways that we communicate, the ways that we market, the ways that we even showcase ourselves are never going to be the same. Even in my own position, like I'm trying to think, like, as much as I joked about it 2 years ago about robot ushers, I'm really trying to figure out how to be robot ushers, because I don't know what this world's going to look like in the next 3 years. And and like I joked about having whatchamacallit hologram services, but honestly, we're gonna have to figure it out. So for you in your field, what are some things you're sensing or seeing on the horizon in commerce as well as and creative? So like those individuals who might be in school for it, who recently graduated for it, what do you see down the line in your position for the next couple of years?
Oh my goodness. We're already, as it relates to AR and AI, we're already toying around with that at CVS Health. But I think, you can, as much as we joke about it, that's the state of where we're going to be. And folks can, you can either be intimidated by it or you can embrace it. And, creative is so fluid. And I think the one thing that a creative person can do is be open to the way our world and society is changing, and be adaptive and adaptable. And that augmented reality and artificial intelligence, it's where it is, and drones. And we're even at CVS Health, we're experimenting with drone delivery.
Wow.
Yeah, we are. So it's I don't know, and I don't want to ramble with this one. That it's such a pointed concept. I think we have to be, as creatives, we have to be really thoughtful about how we try to implement new technologies and consider the work that we do, whether it's in the public sector or the private sector, whether it's religion or health or branding, whatever the sector may be. Think about what it is that your company or the entity that you are, what's your company's purpose and vision, and how these new technologies may be right for your company. And I'm never one to just jump on a bandwagon just for the sake of or just because, but we just have to be thoughtful about how we evolve with the times.
Yeah.
And that's just a fact. Things are changing and evolving. And I think we've all heard this, that the one constant is change.
Yeah.
And I think it's just futile to try to fight change, but we do have to be purposeful with the way that we employ and activate new ideas and new technologies. And the whole hologram as ushers, that I think some folks who are of an older generation, it's like, oh, that's crazy. But, and it's not to completely mitigate the value of human connection, but it's also, how can it be supplemental?
Yeah.
How can, I'm one, I need human interaction and connection. And I still love to go to bookstores and smell and read and thumb through books. I don't have a Kindle or anything like that because I want to open my book and read it and bookmark it. But I have to be thoughtful about, okay, how can I make technologies work for me? I have book pods that, if I'm on a train or something and I don't have much time, I can just pull it up on my iPad. But really being purposeful about how we begin to implement technology. I know I've said it over and over again, but being thoughtful, being purposeful, and getting the perspective when we're dealing with multi-generations, hearing everyone's perspective, because I think younger folks are like, we're all in, let's try it, this is, the next best thing. And then older folks are very, very reluctant, but having a conversation and figuring out what is best for the collective.
Yeah. It's amazing you say that too, because one thing, so at first, even for us, as we transitioned our service online, I was like, yeah, man, cool, right? And then so we did. And then we had some seniors call like, hey, we can't see it. It's like, oh, cool. So we took Kindles to all of them. But what didn't register for me, so like we taught them how to use Kindle, all that stuff, great, right? They don't have Wi-Fi. So so the thing was, it wasn't the reticence to even like the tech. It was just, I don't want that into my home. And we're still on landlines and not even cell phones. So I'm sitting here thinking like, just download the podcast. But if I don't have Wi-Fi, I can't even do that. So then it was like, like you're mentioning, like how it's one thing, it's like the generations are open. Even my own generation, like I'm sitting here like, I thought it was crazy to even think about some of these things. Like I thought robots were just the dumbest things. I thought they were going to take over the world. And now literally we're sitting here thinking about getting one for Cam, like for his birthday, right? So he can do it over the summer so he can go to preschool. So I think it's very important to do that. Now, Sherri, I know one thing that I've worked with you on and seen with you is illustration, right? And I guess I wanted to ask a little bit about illustration, about I guess programs or opportunities that you see either locally here in Providence or even nationally that you've seen or even or been a part of, because I feel like illustration and graphic design and the work that you're doing, and I've seen you on your iPad when you like design things, like it's awesome. But I guess if someone were to pursue that or wanted to pursue that, what are ways they can get into that? They can learn a little bit. I don't know. I don't really know how to shape that, but in terms of concrete illustration, if I wanted to jump into it, where can I get started, and then how can I grow?
Yeah. Where do you start? uh, ink to paper. I don't know. There's so many, oh God, there's so many books out there. There's so many apps out there. I would say, start with a click. And by a click, I mean, this might seem stupid, but seriously, if someone who loves to illustrate, loves to draw, start with a Google illustration, and I mean, there's so many documentaries and I mean, it's so vast. The Adobe suite, it's so vast. It is so you can see I'm struggling here to try to summarize. How does one even start?
Yeah.
And I would imagine for younger folks, that curve is not nearly as high. I mean, they're so adept at with technology and just understanding how to get information. I would say though, if that's your passion, to pursue it. I mean, if you're in an area where there are art colleges, like we here, we're fortunate to have RISD. They have an amazing illustration program, and they also have continuing education programs. You can start there, taking continuing education classes at an art school or even online. But because illustration is so tactile and visual, I would say if it's a digital path, if you have an iPad, there are apps like Concept and Procreate that are wonderful. And like I mentioned earlier, just be open to finding inspiration everywhere. Connect with, I don't know, local authors and illustrators.
Yeah.
There's this series on Netflix called Abstract, and this is my plug for it because it just highlights so many of the different sectors of design. There is, illustration and photography and graphic design and typography and set and stage design.
Wow.
I think of Ruth Carter, who is an apparel designer. She was the apparel designer for Black Panther, in her story, and she's a woman of color. And I mean, that's a great place to start, Netflix. So, and then just ask questions, be diligent about just asking and keeping yourself open to getting information anywhere. I think, open your mouth, ask, inquire. One of Charlie's school teachers, she was a phenomenal math teacher, and she wanted to kind of, as a second stage in her career, she wanted to venture into graphic design. And she and I had conversations, and eventually I think she ended up taking classes at RISD, but it started with a conversation. And I thought, who knew that Miss Trites was interested in, visual design, but, that was another passion of hers. And she reached out to someone she knew who was already in that field. And then she took it upon herself to find other avenues for information. So keep yourself open, ask questions, tap into your resources.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Sherri. No, that's awesome, and that's powerful. I would, like I said, I've always been intrigued to just ask you those things. I've been curious because I personally didn't realize how expansive creativity really was, and how. And so this is eye-opening and wonderful. So Sherri, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for this wisdom. And so everyone on our podcast, Sherri, if you wanted to get in contact with you, if you wanted to follow you, if you wanted to, I don't know, see the things you're doing, all of that, how can we connect with you on socials or anything like that?
Sure. Well, you can connect with me. I'm on Instagram, but a lot of my work, I'm trying to curate my work on Instagram right now. So my Instagram page isn't really one you'd want to follow because it's just
whack, guys. But
it really is. It's nothing. It's just like, I'm out and about. But in terms of my creative work, I'm still, I think sometimes I overthink everything, and it's like, no, I don't want to put this out yet. But if you want to get in touch with me, love.sherri@gmail.com. So old school, my email address. But if you have questions or just want to chat, that's a great place to start. I'm on Facebook. I am on Instagram, so you can hit me up there.
No, your shots and angles be fine. Like, I'm like, how do you capture this? And like all of this, like I was trying to figure out how to do that once. Like I was outside, I was like, what is this? Like, this is amazing. And I've been to those spaces and I'm like, I never see this, but I'm like, that's just like the eye that you have and you're able to see things that I'm like, this is just phenomenal. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I love it. Sherri, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. You guys, please give your clapping hand emojis in the comment section. And those of you who are listening on the podcast, all this information and the questions we asked and like timestamps are in the show notes. So you can go to the show notes and grab a hold of those. So thanks to Sherri Love. Sherri, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you, Sherri Love, and we'll see you guys next week.